Hey guys, I'm Chris Buck, and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks, and this week, the reality of online guitar polls. Now we've all seen it, myriad videos, articles, opinion pieces, scathing responses, vociferous retorts, etc., etc., in the wake of a major magazine publishing a Greatest Guitarist list. Rolling Stone, Classic Rock Magazine, Guitar World, Total Guitar, Guitarist, Guitar Player, Music Radar, you name them, they will have published such a list or vote at some point. It's almost as if such pieces and the intensity of the response that they elicit are good for generating traffic and physical sales. Who'd have thunk it? Now, of course, the latest magazine to publish such an article is Total Guitar Magazine here in the UK, with a list of the 100 greatest blues guitarists of all time. An incendiary, star-studded who's who of blues. Clapton, Hendrix, Buddy Guy, Stevie Ray, Albert King, Lightning Hopkins, Robert Johnson, Big Bill Broonzy, Paul Kossoff, B.B. King, Chris Buck, John Lee Hooker. Wait, hang on, what? If you're surprised, imagine my amazement to hear my name even mentioned in the same breath as any of those guys, even more so coming in at number 27, ahead of the likes of Jeff Healey or John Mayer, Howlin' Wolf, Elmore James, Keith Richards, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Robin Ford, Son House, etc., etc. So, what does this mean? Well, first and foremost, absolutely sweet FA, of course. Even those most unapologetically apoplectic in their rage on social media would probably acknowledge, if only they would stop gnawing at the bedpost in anger for just a few seconds, that it's just a vote, it's just a magazine, it's just an opinion, it's just a social media popularity contest. I honestly like to think that if Mississippi Fred McDowell were alive today, he honestly wouldn't lose any sleep over being pipped to number 62 by Marcus King. It doesn't mean anything, and there's certainly no good reason to be sending hate mail, as I've had quite a lot of in the last week actually since this list was published, to the musicians who you feel are maybe less deserving of a place on this list, or celebrating another musician, but at the expense of running a lesser musician's name into the mud on social media. Now, totally by chance, last week in Germany on tour, I met up with a good mate of mine, Martin Miller, and one of the things that we spoke about at length was this perception that this competition between musicians, specifically in relation to the comment section on our Purple Rain Jam, a video from Guitar Summit in Mannheim back in 2022. Who's bigger? Who's better? Who won? Honestly, hand on heart, it just does not exist between musicians. That said, I wouldn't be so presumptuous to dare to try to speak for every musician out there, but in my experience at the very least, any time I've met or jammed with or had the privilege of playing with or performing in front of another great musician, they relish the opportunity of performing with other good musicians simply because it's just a fun thing to do. Of course you want to play your best and be the best representation of yourself and your ability as possible, but hand on heart, at no point when I've been playing with Martin or Slash or Joe Bonamassa, whoever, has it once crossed my mind that I'm trying to best them in any way, shape or form. If nothing else, let's be real, I wouldn't have a chance in hell of doing so. As immensely flattering as it is, I certainly didn't ask for inclusion in Guitar World or Total Guitar's list in the first place, and I didn't ask people to vote for me, primarily because I thought the idea of me even being in the conversation to start with was slightly farcical. The idea of being mentioned in the same breath as true musical heroes of mine and pioneering greats of the blues, specifically in relation to a genre as well that, if I'm honest, myself and I know many others don't really consider me to be a part of, did seem like a recipe for disaster. Yes, I'm a huge blues fan and grew up on a diet of Clapton and Stevie Ray and Hendrix and B.B. King and Buddy Guy and Albert Collins and Albert King and Freddie King. You name them, I devoured it as a kid, but blues music, in my experience, in much the same way as jazz actually, has a very small, if not very vocal, amount of self-appointed kind of defenders of the realm who will happily aid you in what should be considered or what shouldn't be considered blues music. And subsequently, whenever I am included in such a list, I immediately feel as though I'm going to be pissing someone off or stepping on someone's toes, which really isn't what music is about. It's certainly not what I'm about, and it's definitely not why I started playing guitar. earning anything approaching a decent living by simply playing an instrument, unless you have the energy to be out pretty much every night of the week playing covers. And that's not to denigrate that for a second. That was me for many a year. Been there, done it, bought the t-shirt. Is incredibly hard to do so, even more so when all of the typical revenue streams of years gone by, like physical sales, are evaporating in front of our eyes, or profit margins being cut by bureaucratic bullshit like carnets and exorbitant visa costs. This really isn't me moaning. This is the job that I chose, and I would not change it for a second, but I could really do without this perception of competition between musicians, which, if it's not been invented by social media has undoubtedly fanned its flames. It simply does not exist between musicians, and if it does anywhere, it really shouldn't. It's only rock and roll, or it's only blues. As ever, I'm Chris Buck. Thank you very much for watching. This is Friday Fretworks. Please subscribe, hit the bell icon if you haven't already, and I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers, guys. Take care. See you soon.